Welcome to Heroes That Help. Conversations with heroes who respond to disastrous storms, floods, and tornadoes that wreak havoc every year in Missouri. I'm Tom Steever for the Missouri Department of Mental Health. The impact of natural disasters goes beyond damage and physical injury. There is mental suffering among those recovering from disaster-related trauma. This compassionate caution from the Missouri Department of Mental Health. Some of the information we discuss in this visual radio series may be distressing or traumatizing for some people. If you need help, we encourage you to reach out to supportive people. There is help available through behavioral health services, including treatment for mental illness and substance use disorders. Today we're talking with Owen Hasson, State Traffic Incident Manager with the Missouri Department of Transportation. Owen, welcome.
Good morning.
Owen, what is your job? Describe that.
Well, currently my job is helping set policies for our traffic incident management programs and emergency response programs, training responders on how to work together and coordinate for traffic incidents, the large incidents. For example, back in March we had a large 47-car pileup. So working everybody together so we can quickly and safely clear the roadways for the traveling public and make it much more safer for the responders out there. So making things safer, reducing congestion, and getting traffic flowing back again. That's kind of my job right now, currently.
So how and when would MoDOT become involved in disaster response?
So in disaster response, whenever something is larger and that impacts the state of Missouri, we get involved. Transportation, if you're looking at it from the state agency, from SEMA, from the State Emergency Operations aspect of it, they break it down to emergency support functions, and we are ESF1, Emergency Support Function 1, which is transportation. I always say that's number one because people need to be able to move back and forth throughout the state of Missouri, and responders and everybody needs to move through there. So if something impacts the state of Missouri, usually we're called up. So whether there's a weather storm happening that could be a snowstorm that's impacting the region, flooding that impacts the roadway, and it's not just roadways. Remember, we deal with waterways and airways. It's the Department of Transportation, so everything doing it, so working with rail yards and everything else. But it's typically the roadways. So if it affects the roadway, we're usually called up for it, and we're one of the first ones out there to start securing the roads, making diversion routes, all sorts of notifications. So not only the public, but responders know how to get and then ingress and egress out of different situations.
Yeah, you alluded to this a little bit, but what's the proper chain of command resulting in MoDOT's involvement in a response?
Well, as all incidents, they usually start out small or they start out locally. So if something happens locally and it starts impacting the region, that regional or building area that it happens into, it could be the county or whatever that the MoDOT district's in, it starts to build up, and then if they run out of resources or they need more help, they start escalating up to the district aspect, so that it starts to escalate in manner. And if the district is unable to handle that, they will call up to the MoDOT Emergency Management Center, and we will get them extra resources, and then it will start to escalate. If it goes beyond our ability as an agency to handle it, then we will ask for help from other agencies. So it really follows the Incident Command Structure, the ICS, NIMS, National Incident Management Structure system is what we typically follow in Missouri and with the MoDOT.
Okay. Well, tell me, let's talk about what you've witnessed in terms of managing personal mental stress of the people bearing the impact of a disaster. In other words, the people you're helping. What have you witnessed in that regard?
The people we're helping, well, depending on what kind of disaster we're talking about, for the big ones, when we're talking about floods and large storms, that really impacts especially the ingress out of their homes. So we'll see a river rising. We know we're working with the National Weather Service or the hydraulic graphs. Hey, this levee's going to overtop here soon. It's going to start flooding out this community. We need to make sure that the roads are open so people can get out there, so other emergency responders and folks can get down there and help coordinate getting folks out of there. But when people want to come back in, it can really devastate their lives when they cannot get back to their home. So we're shutting down the roadways. So people always kind of see the big yellow trucks out there and they think we're pothole patching, which we do a lot of, but we also maintain the roads, and we also help shut down roads and restrict them for traffic to go through. So a lot of times we're the folks that are manning those roadways, and we get the residents that are in there that are complaining to our maintenance folks, our emergency response folks, hey, we need to get into the house, into this local area, but it's not safe for them to go into. The roadway may be washed out and it could endanger them. And it's a pretty devastating impact along the residents that are involved with it, much less when we're working let's say a large traffic incident where maybe a bus has gone off to the side of the roadway, and then the parents come rolling up, and then you have very upset parents or relatives or loved ones that are trying to see, hey, what's the condition of our child? And sometimes we are the emergency response folks are the first ones on scene even before fire or anybody else, and they're like, hey, we're trying to get hold of the situation. We don't even know the names of the kiddos. So it's pretty devastating for not only the folks arriving on scene, but also for our folks who are trying to explain the situation.
I want to get into that too, because what have you witnessed as far as your colleagues or your fellow responders about their mental anguish, their mental trauma in this, and how do you deal with that?
Well, there's different aspects of it. For example, for that, it reflects. They reflect back on it, and they're just like, "Hey, I wish I could have done this," or "Can we do this?" They want to do more, and it usually impacts them in a way that you're talking about. Usually around the water cooler, or back at the shift room, at the shift change room, where it's like, "Oh, I wish I could have done more. Hey, boss, can we do this and do that?" And you can tell it kind of drags them down. We have outreach programs such as the Employee Assistance Program, the EAP, that they can reach out to, but not a lot of training within most agencies as to how to recognize those type of aspects of it. But we've seen it, and I've seen some pretty devastating things with some personal folks that one, and I can share a story on that too. Where and there was a tow truck driver, and when our emergency response folks go, we always think of the law enforcement people stopping and doing things like that, but really one of the unrecognized folks out there are within the nation. They call them Safety Service Patrol when we call them emergency response, the old motorist assist folks. They're some of the only people, especially in the urban areas, that actually stop and do wellness checks. You see an abandoned vehicle, or what you suppose is an abandoned vehicle, and they stop and do a check on it. Law enforcement's usually too busy, especially nowadays after a lot of the transitions that we've been going through. They just don't have the staffing to do that, and other responders don't. So we do a lot of wellness checks. Well, it was late in the evening, actually it was on the overnight shift, and one of our guys had stopped and was checking on a tow truck operator. There's a tow truck operator, had stopped. They were on the shoulder of the road in the St. Louis region. They were off the shoulder, fairly safe, everything was fine. Our guy got another call about a lane blocking incident. He took off, he talked to the tow truck driver and said, "Hey, are you okay?" He's like, "Oh yeah, routine thing, I got it." He took off and then went to go take it along. About 10 minutes later, he hears another call across the police radio and our radio that there was a tow truck driver that was struck and killed. Oh. And it was him.
And how do you deal with that? Yeah.
He came back and he was devastated.
Sure.
He was devastated. So he's back. He's like, "Oh man, if only I would have stayed." And it's the stories that can kind of get to me too, not only some of the experiences, but just hearing them is like, what do you do? How do you reach out? It's like, hey, we have these programs, the EAP, we have all this other stuff that you can do too. Yeah. But a lot of times it's the talking around the water cooler, talking at talking to your coworkers, things like that kind of help out about that. And it's the second guessing. Should I have left? Mm-hmm. Well, he was on the shoulder. He was fine. He said he was okay. I had another call that was a priority one, another crash that was in the lane where people could have been hurt and killed. He went to that one, which was protocol and procedures. Everything else was fine. And the tow truck driver got killed.
That's got to be very tough to deal with, mentally, especially the aftermath of something like that. So anecdotally, if you could add to that, what have you been personally involved with as far as an incident that sticks out for you?
Well, for that one, actually, I went out to that one after the call, yeah. So I was out to that one. So I've actually responded to quite a few fatalities and incidents on the roadway, and for myself, I try to distance myself at the scene. I think a lot of responders do when we're all talking. You kind of know each other when you're out there. You start, you might drive by and you see somebody, it appears that they're jovial or laugh. It's just their way to detach
yes.
from the scene.
Yes.
So you kind of concentrate on the situation, the issue that's on hand, and you detach from it. And I think after the years, you get better at that. But when you start to reflect back, sometimes it gets to you more. And for myself, it's some of the stories even ones I don't work. It's usually the stories that you hear that I'm like, oh man, that's just so sad. In March, there was that big crash down in southeast Missouri. It was on I-57, and unfortunately, there was 5 people killed in that crash. There, 47 vehicles involved in it. Blue barrels all over. They thought it was a hazardous material. Ended up being vinegar, but the smell of vinegar was just permeating the air, and you're walking through, it gets on your boots and everything else. Yeah. So you smell vinegar, it's like, oh, and then now you smell vinegar, it's like, I remember March of 2022. Yeah. So those type of things can bring up memories and things like that, but you talk them through. I usually don't talk them through with family, usually with, like I said, you're talking to other responders and things like that.
Yeah. From a personal standpoint, Owen, it's, you can tell there is difficulty in dealing with these things, specifically what you've pointed out are traffic accidents and that sort of thing. What do you use as a release mechanism? How do you deal with it and get through the day?
Usually it's not the day like I mentioned. Usually I just seem, for me personally, I'm kind of disconnected from the scene at the time, and then you reflect on it. It's usually at the end of the day when you jump back in the car and you're doing that long drive back, or if it's long, short drive, whatever drive back, and you start thinking about family and friends and everything else. Might talk about it with some coworkers or some friends and things like that. I typically don't bring it into the family household or anything like that. We don't like the fire folks have extractor washing machines to take things out and things like that. We don't have any of that, so they can tell if I'm taking boots off in the garage or something like that. I've probably been in something pretty nasty that's not dragging it into the house. Yeah. For that. So lots of support though.
Yeah.
From the family.
Support among colleagues.
Support among colleagues and support among family.
Yeah.
They know it's like, hey, this is kind of a nasty day. So, okay. Won't talk to them about it.
Enough said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're in the business of helping people normally on their worst days, but what have you experienced that might have sent you away from a situation that kind of brightened your outlook, or what's a lighter moment that you might bring up?
Of all of our folks, that's why they're in it. You're in it for the gratitude of the help the people out, and day in and day out, it's the worst day. You're involved in a traffic crash, and whether or not they're the small minor things that people usually think of them about, hey, they're giving me a gallon of gasoline or changing their tire, it's scary for 99% of the folks to be broken down on the side of the roadway, and then they're out there, they don't know what to do. Cars are flying by them at 70 miles an hour. They're frightened to death, and that's our office. We're used to working it. And, they get all happy, everyone's happy, and, hey, can we help? They're just the joy of helping people, out on those particular days, or holding somebody's hand until in the crash, until other responders that are qualified, like EMS, arrives on there and just makes their day, and they can remember you. Those are the kind of the thoughts that bring a lot of levity to the job, and the reward.
Yeah. You know, because you hear often from people who have been helped by a first responder, and they seem to have a lot of gratitude toward that. I would imagine that's what you live for.
Yeah, that's usually the joy that keeps people on and keeps them going, keeps them making them go through the day.
Yeah. Well, what maybe have we not touched on here that you would like to add?
You never know how to handle some of those situations. If there's a big incident or one that's very impactful, let's say coworkers, because we've worked different coworker fatalities that have, where we've had a coworker killed or very seriously injured. A new person might come up and they start talking about the situation. Then you have a more seasoned person saying, well, Tom, if you think that's bad, I had to work this, and they start to over talk that person, and it kind of shuts that new person down from expressing their feelings and releasing it. But as I've seasoned through the years, I used to get a little frustrated with that person that was over talking about their, hey, that's the I have a bigger, better fish story. But that's kind of their pressure release too. They never really had the opportunity to talk about this big bad one that they worked, and now they're a good person, but they don't mean to really overtalk them. At least that's kind of the way I picture it. It's like, I'm not really trying to shut them down, but that's their way of purging on that story from before, and they want to bring it back around to this one here so everyone else can purge onto it. So kind of working your way through these situations as you get more seasoned in positions and working incidents, I think also helps in understanding the different viewpoints of folks. I think that kind of helps too, at least for me.
Very good. Well, thank you, Owen Hasson, State Traffic Incident Manager with the Missouri Department of Transportation, one of the important heroes that help when disaster strikes. And a lot of those, of course, take place on the roadways. This program is brought to you by the Missouri Department of Mental Health and is made possible through the Disaster Response State Grant. Please, if you need help, we encourage you to reach out to supportive people, whether through Missouri Behavioral Health Services or another mental health professional. Join us again when we'll talk with another of our heroes that help. And remember, recovery is possible. I'm Tom Steever.